Hey, hey, we're live. This is Emily Batten from Dare to Decide. We are doing some Dare interviews here. I'm the author of Dare to Decide, Discovering Peace, Clarity, and Courage at Life's Crossroads. And I have an amazing couple here I met last October. We were at the same conference table together, and we might have been the quiet ones at the table. I don't know. And so this is Janet and Bruce, and I know I was just captivated and curious all through the conference in getting to know you. And we were at a VIP table, which means we just paid a little bit more money. That basically showed we wanted more interest, more invested us, more accountability, and we kind of wanted to raise up to a level of the passion and the gifts and the book in our heart, right? So I knew, not going at our table, oh, these guys are serious about what they're feeling called to do. And so I think that was my introduction to you. And then I find out that you are authors of a book called Life at Ground Level. And really, it was a book about homelessness. This is what the whole title is called. And it's a lot. It's homelessness, hopelessness, and redemption is seen through the eyes of America's invisible people. And nice light topic, sounds like. And so all of a sudden, immediately, I was like, oh wow. And I have to tell you, and I bought your book. And the reason why it captured my attention is I have a friend, and I know she's going to be watching today or this weekend, who has a heart to write a book about homelessness. And so it partly caught my attention because I knew this is kind of what she's been wrestling with. But then I was just hearing and realizing you have a story. I bought your book. I actually got it to give it to her, but I read it, and I almost I wasn't sure what I was going to get into, right? I was like, oh, am I going to feel like totally enough about this? I'm not aware, right? Like, I actually, if I'm fully honest, was hesitant reading it to say, oh no, what am I going to do? Like, I like to be blissfully ignorant when I read books and not feel uncomfortable. But I'm like, no, I read some other books where I'm like, no, I need to read this because I need to feel uncomfortable. And there's a lot of things going on nowadays where we do need to step into some uncomfortable conversations. So for me, I had personal reasons why I was getting into that. And so I started reading it. And I want to tell you, it was a beautiful story. I was moved to tears a few times. It was sweet. You really had a beautiful way of bringing me to a world that I've never really had to pay attention before, that I've never really, understood or knew about very long. So I would love this interview to tell us. I've got some questions for you, or you can just share, first of all, just your story and how you came to write this book and what makes you qualified to write this book, what it was like writing it, and what is the passion behind this book there. So those are all my questions all at once, but we'll just go by one. So yeah, first, tell me about the book. So Janet, Bruce, whoever wants to go first, tell us first of all, what qualifies you to write this book? Who are you? What did you bring into this?
Well, first of all, Bruce is the primary author. He worked on this book for 8 years before I joined with him, so that we were able to get it done.
Yeah.
Because he's really struggling with it. And he has more experience with homelessness than I do. I worked a lot with people who had been homeless because I worked in behavioral health and public health in various areas, so that, I did have patients who were homeless. And then at some point, I also became disabled and had to not work. And I was fortunate in that I had a 401k, and I used that to buy a motorhome, so we had somewhere to live, and so we were not on the street. And I was able to get disability right away. So it was a little bit different situation. But, I mean, that could have ended up in us being homeless. I mean, we certainly lost our home and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Wow. And Bruce, yes, to tell me about 8 years. So what inspired 8 years wrestling through writing a book?
Well, let me tell you from the beginning.
Sure.
It just after I was homeless and met Janet online, moved up to Washington. I was at we both were at a church retreat, and at one point, the man who was running the retreat split us into tables with 3 people, so we could pray for each other. And while we were doing that, he approached us, and I had thought about writing the book, but I hadn't really gotten a good start on it yet. He approached our table and looked at a woman who was sitting next to me and said, "Are you writing a book?" And she said, "No, I've never thought of writing a book." And I said, "I am." And he knew at that point, without being told, what the book was about and why I wanted to write it. And it was like a message to my heart. And so I kind of got serious about it at that point, but I really struggled for a long time to say what I wanted to say, to where people would listen to it, And then finally, Janet basically put a boot in my butt and said, "Get this thing done."
Yeah, I started writing sections and giving them to them, and writing backstories for the characters, and
Yeah.
You need to put this in.
So, and then I got to a point where I had a routine that I did every day, as far as Bible reading and prayer, and actually doing little number puzzles to get my thoughts organized. And then when I started doing that every day, I set myself a goal, and I got that goal done every day, and finally got the book done. So it was just a matter of getting motivated enough where I could just put something on paper.
Yeah.
They tell you that when you sit down to write a book, just write. You can go back and edit later. And that's really what I did. And, things came out to the point where it didn't need tons of editing. But I mean,
by the time the 2 of us had gone through it, it was pretty well edited. Before we actually sent it to an editor.
Yeah. So there was years of that, struggling, figuring out your rhythm. What was at the heart of you wrestling through that book for 8 years, knowing like it wasn't just a hobby? There was a message that was deep in your heart that you wanted people to know. What was like that passion behind that you wanted people to know and understand from reading that? Or see? What did you want them to see differently?
It was from being on the street, and seeing how people avoided your eyes. It was from seeing that, like on the news, how homeless people were basically ignored in news stories. And I knew in my heart that if I wrote the book, that maybe some people's eyes would be opened, and say, I didn't know this, and what can I do about this? And that's been the goal all along, as far as I'm concerned, is just to show people. And a lot of the books that I read about homelessness, they're basically statistics. And
I've read a bunch.
Yeah, and
they're boring.
They don't really tell the personal story of the people behind the story. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And that's going for all that time. So.
And I think that's what I loved about the book when I read it. You really had rich characters. The backstory you mentioned, it was there. It's not just a person on a street. You just knew there's messiness and things that didn't go right. And sometimes it works out for some people and it doesn't always work out for someone else. And you've got the conflict that you run into, and you have the things you didn't even think of. Like, so tell me some of the things that, like before the call, Bruce, you were saying just some of the little things that are just so different when you're living on the street that put you in survival mode. It affects even the way that what you see and how you think even.
Well, a lot of people don't understand when you're on the street. A lot of people think, well, why don't you just get a job, and get a place to live? But when you're on the street, it's almost impossible. You don't have an address. You don't have contacts. You don't have transportation. You don't have clothes for interview. It's an amazing experience to look at people and know that they don't understand where you are. They don't understand why you're there and why you don't just get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And from my own personal experience, when I was doing well and I was fairly affluent, I was one of those people that, when somebody would come up to me and ask for money, I said, well, get a job, but I really think that God did this partially to show me what could be done and what should be done.
Wow.
That's kind of my take on it. I was actually on the street when I became a Christian. I had a pastor who was just that night was his first night coming out and talking to people on the street. He was opening kind of like a halfway house for homeless and for people coming out of jail and things like that. He would go out on the street and try to approach people. This was his first night, and I was the first person that he approached. It became to me a new path, kind of, for me. Even though right after that, he invited me to stay at his halfway house, and that didn't work out. And when I left there, that's when the final decline came for me, before I got into a crisis center and into transitional housing. But that's kind of where I came from. But it changed my heart to be there, because I saw people that wanted to have a different life, wanted to be in a place where they could have relationships and be happy. And especially when I was in transitional housing and talking to those people, it was something that like I said, it changed my heart. It made me realize that I had to do something, and it turned out that this book was the something that I had to do. So
that's beautiful. And so when you chose a novel over writing a book of facts and helpful tips and evaluation of approaches. So tell me, what inspired you to use a novel format as opposed to nonfiction to carry your message?
Well, because not a lot of people read those books. They get partway through them and say, this is all statistics. It doesn't say exactly who these people are, where they've been, where they're going, the challenges that they have. It's all about statistics that I could get from the government if I wanted to get those statistics. That's really what those books are about. And I wanted people to feel what it was like to be on the street. I thought that would change more minds than just a statistical book.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that what Jesus did too? He told stories and kind of spun things around to say, oh, I'm that person in that story. Whoops. You really did do a beautiful job carrying those emotions. And there's a sweet story in there too. In the story, so there's a hopeless man and the people that he meets, and there's also a nurse, right? It's a nurse that's in there?
Nurse practitioner.
Yeah, a nurse practitioner. So Janet, is that
Nurse practitioner?
No, she was a doctor.
You in the story? Is the nurse practitioner that he meets and encounters, and she's compassionate and lovely and
biographical.
Yeah.
There are some things that were like that. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
There are some characters that were based on people, real people.
Yeah.
There are some situations, I won't go into all of them, but there are some situations in the book that I personally experienced. I based it on that. And like I said, the doctor was definitely inspired by a certain long-haired redhead. So.
That's beautiful. And so, yes, you did a really well job. And so anyone, if you are watching, for one, if you're watching now or the replay, let us know you're here and watching. Just give us some hearts or drop replay in the comments, or, just say, hey, love to read this book this summer sometime, or I do not want to read this book because I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't know, right? Where are you at with this? Let us know in the comments. Give us some love there. But then you talked about some of the things that that people believe about, the misconceptions, the myths about homelessness. So maybe share some of those more, just some practical things that maybe we don't even realize we believe about homelessness that affects the options of maybe how we can respond if we encounter someone, or what we can do even if we don't really encounter them. What are some of the myths that you're seeing are pretty common?
I think a lot of times people blame the homeless for their situation. And the most common reason why people end up on the street are things like illnesses, accidents, job loss. You lose your job, you lose your insurance too. So, then you can't get health care. So your health spirals down. I mean, there's so much involved in that people don't look at. It's not just a matter of these people made a choice to be on the street.
Admittedly, there are some people, very few people, who actually are more comfortable on the street.
Yeah.
Like one of the characters in the book, the veteran in the book, basically is there because he can't be around people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people believe is that there's so much out there that could help homeless people, but the thing is, in order to be able to get to those places that can give you help, you have to be able to get there. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't occur to people that wherever you go, you have to walk, because there's no money for bus or whatever. You have to walk where you go, and you have to take your possessions with you, or they will get stolen. People just think that there should be some easy transition, but the transition is never easy because of the difficulty in some things that people take for granted. So.
And I think another thing that people don't realize is a lot of people who are homeless are working. They just don't earn enough that they can afford housing. Mm-hmm. The housing is not affordable.
And one of the things that you made so clear in the book is just how much, like you just mentioned, the travel, or you can't get anywhere, but even if you do try to get anywhere, how much time it takes if you were to get a job, how much time it takes to get there. And if it's hot and muggy out, you're arriving, all sweaty, you're not presentable either. So then that affects your chances, or you're late because something else happened along the way. And then you get fired or laid off because there are so many things you just ran into, just even survival mode getting there, or not having a good night's sleep,
Right.
which totally affects your cognitive ability too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not being able to groom yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's powerful. So where can people, if they want to dive into this book or just have it, it's a good read, even if you aren't, it's a well crafted story, even if your passion isn't homelessness. It's thought-provoking, but it's a sweet story as well. Where can people find your book?
Well, there's a link on the website, and then of course Amazon also has it. So.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to put that in the comments here. So the website, whoops, that's the wrong one. Here, let me just see here. All right. And so what would you say to someone if they, what are the practical things that they could do if they wanted to help someone nowadays? And I know it's even more challenging with COVID nowadays, and there's all kinds of implications there, which a lot of uncertainty, but even in a normal day, what are some of the practical ways someone could help?
Well, one of the things is to get connected with organizations that are already present in your own community.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. There are organizations out there. They need more money. They need more volunteers. They need help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially now. People that are willing to put themselves out there and say, go to a homeless shelter and volunteer. That helps them immensely, because one of the main problems that they have is they don't have enough staff. They don't have enough budget to be able to hire somebody to do those jobs. Volunteerism for homeless shelters is extremely important. Just like one of the things that we're planning on doing, if the sales of the book ever take off, is to donate some of that money to organizations that help the homeless. And they always need money. They're always on a tight budget. And just, I would say to people, just look at your heart and see what you can bring to the problem. So.
Beautiful, practical, simple. Someone's already got the system set up. They just need someone to come alongside them.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. Yeah.
And taking the course that we're writing also will help people know what to do.
Yes, that's right. Now you've been facing your own challenges. It's kind of like you had this big mission. You had all your plans set, and it wasn't even COVID that kind of made them come crashing down. Maybe share some of the setbacks that you've been facing just briefly this year, Janet.
Yeah, well, I was diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of the year.
Wow,
so, instead of working on the course, it was like I was going through diagnostic testing, surgery, chemo, and chemo really wipes you out, so that it's really difficult to do anything. And I finally finished treatment and am just kind of waiting for my body to recover.
Yeah, well, that's something definitely looking to look forward to, is just practical ways people can see opportunities differently, how organizations can help, how you can, that awareness. So yeah, keep working on that course whenever you're able to get back at it. I know you're just starting to kind of feel like yourself again, hopefully, and so then can kind of get back.
Yeah, Janet's got lots of ideas of how she wants to do this, and my thing is trying to get this course going to where we both agree on where it's going. And, I admit I need to be more proactive about that, but
Yeah.
it's been kind of tough this year. So
Yeah.
but we
So
will get
even
on it.
I guess some ways that can inspire you is if you are listening today and you have questions and they might feel like dumb questions or ignorant questions, or maybe you're like, I don't know if this is politically correct, or I don't know if I have the right words, or, do I sound totally ignorant if I say this? But they could send you their questions, and that I know that always helps craft a course and let people know, oh, like, this is so obvious to me because you've spent so much time experiencing and living the experience and researching that we forget what we just automatically know and other people aren't even realizing. So if you're watching, just contact them at their website. Again, Love at Ground Level. They're also on Facebook, and let them know the questions or the feelings around this that can help them create this to equip you to make a difference in people's lives, and the marginalized, and people who just need someone to come alongside, believe in them, and help them in really practical ways. And so if I want to shift this around, and if you're watching and there's a different cause on your heart, and this series is Dare to Decide, and sometimes it's dare to be uncomfortable and think from a different perspective, slow down and maybe see something around you that you haven't yet. And sometimes it's the dare is to use instead of thinking, well, I don't know enough, or I don't have enough, or I couldn't do what they're doing about a cause, but there's a cause that breaks your heart. There's something that gets you riled up and angry, or it keeps you up at night, or it dissolves you to tears whenever you think about it. And what is that issue? And what are the gifts that you've been given? The talents, that thought that just won't go away. What is that prompting you're feeling? And what are the gifts that you have already? And for you, Bruce, would you have considered yourself even a writer before you started writing the book?
I was told I had an English teacher when I was a sophomore in high school, who used to write for Disney. And he told me that I should pursue writing as a career. But of course, I had to get out of high school. And then 8 days after high school, I went in the Army. When I got out of the Army, I was already married and a parent. It took me a long time to tell myself that it was okay to start writing instead of getting a real job. And now, my kids are grown, and I'm getting disability from the VA, so I have enough to keep us going. And that's when I felt comfortable about sitting down at the computer and just writing.
Yeah.
So
there's an element of giving yourself permission to say, maybe this isn't a practical solution, but either way, I just have to do this. Right. Then there's a timing element, and yeah, timing isn't all right, but at some time the timing is right, and you just got to do it, even though it doesn't feel like everything's come together, and you just got to do it. Yeah. And then other times it's just, you got to recognize, what are your talents? What are things someone has affirmed in you to say, you're really good at this, you should consider this. And what do you have? And start with that. And then along the way, you might have someone that comes in and says, oh, like, I see what you're doing. And they offer the collaboration or the accountability or the kick in the pants or the ideas. But it doesn't happen unless you start and people realize, oh, you're serious about this. Hey, I want in on that. That's a beautiful vision that you have. I see what you're doing there. So I guess my encouragement to anyone watching is, what is your dare today? What is it, that dare that you need to step in and to own and just get started to make that difference? And where can you use storytelling? Doesn't have to be writing a book, though we have some ideas for you if that is the case. But how can you tell stories to change someone's view of that cause or that social justice issue that you feel so passionate about? How can you use your story, your experience? How can you use just a different way of carrying a different perspective? So we want to inspire that with you today. And what would you say to someone who had a passion in their heart and they haven't figured out what to do about it yet?
Well, I would say just look at yourself, look at what you're passionate about. I mean, with me, it was writing, and I actually am trying to turn this book into a screenplay. But it's, I mean, do you like going to the movies? Do you have a wish in the back of your head that you could write something that, that you could write a screenplay, that you could write a book, that you could just go out and talk to people? Look at who you are and figure out what would be the most, not only useful thing, but the thing that would really make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And don't wait too long to do it. I mean, I waited till I was over 60 years old to do it, and I could have started a lot sooner, but that's circumstances. Just look at what gives you, what makes your heart glad, and do it. However, try to come up with something that comes and feeds your heart. That's what I would tell people.
Beautiful. Janet, what about you? What would you tell someone?
Well, pretty much the same thing. I mean, you have to basically look at what do you feel passionate about. And I know that some of the things I've done in the past have been things to actually develop goals of what I want to do with my life and go with those. So
here we have a message from Bill here. Bill is watching. He said, I've read this book twice. It's a thoughtful message to everyone. I've volunteered places, had interaction with homeless people. Bruce describes many of the people I know well. Thank you, Bruce and Janet. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, the message is actually from Joy. I have a message from here. Beautiful. All right. Everyone, thank you so much for well, that's the wrong banner, but thank you so much for joining us. Again, you can find the links in the comments where you can find the book. And if you want more inspiration in this conversation of getting started with your own passion, you can pick up my book, Dare to Decide, Discovering Peace, Clarity, and Courage at Life Crossroads. It is released today, July 23rd. And while you're at it, go pick up Life at Ground Level, and you're going to have some great summer reads to start you off. Thank you so much, Bruce and Janet. It was so great to have you on this.
Well, thank you, Emily.
Thank you.